Blacks in Technology.
Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Blacks in Technology Big Tech Talk podcast. This is episode number 86. This is a new year, 2016. Whoop, whoop for that. And this is the first podcast of the new year, so I'm happy and excited about that. We've got a great lineup of podcasts coming your way in 2016, and I'm really happy for this podcast. I'm really excited for this podcast because we actually have a former podcast guest on this show tonight, and we're going to talk about a real interesting topic called failure and rejection. We're going to get more into that. So if this is your first time listening to the podcast, this is a show where we talk to people of color who are engineers, innovators, educators, inventors, and entrepreneurs doing amazing things in the world of technology. This podcast is where they share their experiences, ideas, knowledge, and perspective on tech within the big community. I'm your host, Greg Greenlee. I am the founder of Blacks in Technology. And if you are listening to us, like I said, for the first time, you can check us out at www.blacksintechnology.net. That is where our Blacks in Technology community reside, and we are inching towards, I think, 1,900 members, I want to say. And you can also check us out on Twitter, and that's at Black in Technology. That's BLKINTECHNOLOGY. We are also on Facebook. So you can check us out there, facebook.com/Blacks in Technology. And we also have an ever-growing LinkedIn group under Blacks in Technology. So if you are on Twitter and you're listening to this podcast and you have questions for our guests, tweet them using the hashtag BigTechTalk, and that's BITTECHTALK. We are Blacks in Technology is a tech-focused community and media organization. We're focusing on increasing diversity in technology. We always focus on forming new partnerships and opportunities to assist our members with their continued professional growth and development. So if you want to partner with us, you can send an email to contact us at blacksintechnology.net. Also, if you want to sponsor one of these fantastic, fabulous podcasts and get your company or your app or whatever in front of our audience, also send those inquiries to contact us at blacksintechnology.net. Any partnerships, anything for that matter, send to contact us at blacksintechnology.net. So a few announcements before we actually get into the Q&A of the podcast and our guests. We have a number of jobs that have come up on our site. So you want to go check those out, blacksintechnology.net, I think /jobs board or something like that. But I do want to make a few announcements for the companies that are posting on the site. So first one is Color Stock. They are hiring for a CTO. Color Stock is a stock photo library filling the growing need of authentic depictions of people of color. This is a part-time equity-based position, and they're looking for someone who has the technical chops to help expand and scale their platform. I had Jennifer Daniels on a podcast not too long ago. Real cool people. So if you're interested in tackling that position, the CTO, check out our site. You can find a job there. And another organization, Black Founders, they are looking for a program manager. This is a contract position, and they're looking for someone to help them drive new goals and expand the impact of existing programs. Black Founders, they're family, basically, to me. So go check that out. They're looking for a program manager. This is either based in San Francisco or, on the East Coast. So this is a contract position. So check out Blacks in Technology site for that. Seattle University is hiring for a technical analyst. The technical analyst serves as a key team member of the Enterprise Application Services team, which is responsible for the university's application and systems integration. So Seattle University hiring for a technical analyst. And last but not least, Bradley University is hiring for an assistant professor of interactive media. the Department of Interactive Media in the Slane College of Communications and Fine Arts at Bradley University. They seek applicants for a full-time tenure-track faculty position in interactive media with skills in areas of user experience design and or user interface development. So go check all those jobs out on our jobs board. And if you want to post jobs there, there is actually a form on the jobs board where you can fill out, and we'll receive an email, and we'll have somebody get in contact with you. So we're going to jump into Q&A with our guests. The topic of this tonight's podcast is failure and rejection. And according to magazines, books, blogs, and even autobiographies, failure is such an integral part of success in business. So why aren't the media outlets or founders actively talking about it? And tonight we have Curtis Pope. He's going to join us, and he's going to talk about his own failures and challenges as a founder and how it led to success in his career. Now, a little bit about Curtis. He's been on a podcast. It's been a while since he's been on a podcast, but at the time he was developing OwlFinder, and he's born and raised in Silicon Valley. Started his technology career coding and designing websites and software for companies like Yahoo, Microsoft, and InstallShield. And he has a focus or emphasis on design and functionality. His entrepreneurial spirit led him to found OwlFinder, an app that matches items on shopping lists with owls within supermarkets. And he often shares his views on entrepreneurship, design, and motivation on blogs such as Hacker News, Black Enterprise, Twitter, Facebook, Building While Brown, and has been featured on sites such as TechCrunch, CNN.com, PC Magazine, and CNET. So I want to welcome Curtis back to the show. Curtis, how's it going?
It's going great. It's funny that this is episode number 86 because, I worked in a restaurant for a while, and you know what they call it when you've been rejected from a restaurant or you've been kicked out of a restaurant? They call it getting 86th. This is what they call it, getting 86. Seriously. And a lot of I don't know why they call 86, but that's what it was at the Denny's that I worked at. It was getting 86.
Really?
That was oh yeah, it was a huge thing. And I'm sure a lot of other, it must be in the restaurant lingo dictionary. I don't know, but it was definitely a common thing when I worked at Denny's, which was actually a pretty good career choice. I mean, you make so much money as a server; it's unbelievable.
Right. My daughter is actually. I have to ask my daughter. She's a server.
Really?
She works at a place.
Oh.
Yeah, she works at So she works at a restaurant chain called Cheesecake Factory. I don't know if you all have them out in San Francisco.
Oh yeah, they get blocked up every single weekend. They're just
right.
You go anywhere, there's a Cheesecake Factory, and there's definitely traffic and congestion. So right. So I'll have to ask her and see if she's ever heard. That's interesting, and it's ironic because they don't ask. You can't come back, and here, you came back here, so it works out. Oh yeah, that's true. 86, yeah.
So what have you been up to? First and foremost, before we get into that, for people who haven't caught the previous episode that you appeared on, and shame on you if you haven't, and if you haven't, go back and check it out. It's a cool episode. Let people know, give us some information about your background, how you got into tech.
Well, it was a good episode, so they missed it. But let me just summarize it. So I grew up here. I was born and raised in Silicon Valley. I did live in the Central Valley, which is like Modesto, Fresno area, for a few years as well. But my home and my heart is always going to be Silicon Valley. So I moved back here, I want to say close to 10 years ago now. And, it's really, really awesome living out here. Growing up out here, you get exposed to technology from a very young age. In fact, one of my earliest experiences with technology in general was when Steve Wozniak actually came and donated a bunch of computers to my elementary school. And I didn't know who it was. Yeah, I didn't know who it was until I looked at a class picture like last year. And I'm like, wait a minute, this bearded man looks familiar. So I mean, it just touches you at a very young age, and so in my first grade class, I want to say it may even been kindergarten, we had computer lab day where you'd go and you'd play Sticky Bear and Number Crunchers and all these different little games, and like Oregon Trail, et cetera. And so that was my first exposure to technology. But it was always cool, but it was almost like it was a part of way of life. It was never like this is something over to the side and we live our lives separate from that. It was just part of life growing up out here. And so fast forward, I thought I was going to be a comic book illustrator. I wasn't any good, but I'll talk a little bit about that later.
Okay.
But just briefly, because it's kind of one of the things I've been up to lately. So anyway, fast forward, was going to be an illustrator. It just wasn't in the cards. And so then I switched my focus to designing and developing with computers, and I got heavily involved in the web in the very early days, working at Yahoo and other little companies here and there. And I worked at an ad agency, so it was kind of like firing on all cylinders doing that. And after that, worked at Microsoft on a few projects, and then later on, of course, you kind of listed the few companies that I've worked for. But since Aisle Finder in itself, I've actually I don't have much to do with Aisle Finder day to day anymore. I more or less just kind of look at the books, and I let my oldest employee kind of run the business, because it's really like a one-man shop. It's not a 40-hour week thing.
Right.
And so what I've been able to do is actually focus on, actually making money instead of, spending all my money in a startup. And I've worked on contracts at various companies like The Gap, if you ever shop there. I did their, you've never shopped there?
No, I definitely have.
Oh, I was going to say, wow. I was like, no, I've never shopped there, actually. They just don't make them in my size. I'm a big guy. So, but my wife does. My wife loves, she loves Old Navy, loves Banana Republic. Right. So designed the mobile interfaces for those companies, and, did that. I worked at Stanford for a bit and on a mobile project. And after that, of course, I did the usual kind of dance and rondelay with the startup companies out here. And currently I'm over at Verizon. Pretty much everybody's heard of Verizon. So I'm working on their cable TV product as a programmer, and I'm also working on their mobile product, Go90, which, so those are kind of my latest projects. Go90 is a huge thing for them. You see commercials all over. So that's kind of I would say that's probably the app that I've done recently that's really gotten a lot of legs and a lot of exposure. I mean, they're giving 2 gigs away for free if you go check it out. So if you have a moment, go and download Go90.
I have to check. So Go90 is, what is that again? It
is if you think about it like this, it's kind of like I don't want to say it's Verizon's version of Netflix, but it's similar in those ways where, we obviously have a bunch of content partners. We bought AOL. We bought all these cool companies that have great content. And so now we're trying to expose the masses to that content and develop new content as well. And so Go90 is one of those ways. And the meaning behind the name is that normally our phones are straight up. They're what do they call 45-degree angles. So to watch video, you have to rotate your phone 90 degrees or whatever. So that's kind of the origin of the name. So it's Go90. So that is what I've been doing day to day, day in, day out. Okay. But I've never lost the hunger and passion for startups. In fact, I've done quite a few startups since Aisle Finder. But most of those are things that are, I don't want to say they're passion projects because they do generate, some small coin, but, they're just things that I wanted to do and I've been wanting to do for a while. So I'm just kind of doing that and taking care of my family that way.
Very nice, very nice. So what was the decision, I guess, behind okay, I guess going head all in with your startup and going out and getting a regular 9-to-5? What was the decision making process like around that?
So some things happened in my life, right? So and I don't want to make excuses or be a chump or anything, but the whole reason why I do this, startup thing and anything that I do as a developer is so that I can take care of my family. And
right.
And I didn't want to be another casualty that lost sight of that. And it was one of these things where I'll find her, by my idea, by my meaning, it was a success because it hasn't really stopped making money per se, but it doesn't make millions of dollars in revenue either. So it's just one of these things that, okay, it's viable, but, maybe not viable enough to where you can quit your day job and start doing this thing full time. So, and then, once again, other things happened in my life. My wife's father got sick and he came to live with us. He's from a different country, so he came to live with us while he was getting treatment. And so, it was one of these things where, look, I can go and do this thing and act like I don't have someone to take care of and I don't have any of these other responsibilities, but it would kind of lose sight of why I do what I do. And, I'm very, I grew up very poor. So, one of the things that was always stressed for me was that, look, if you have a family, your obligation is to take care of them. And so, I chose to kind of back off the startup life for a while. And that's kind of why people haven't seen me out there for a long time because, I just said, well, look, if I go to this meetup, I'm going to meet entrepreneurs and they're going to tell me their ideas and I'm going to get involved with them. And you know what I mean? I'm going to want to meet up for coffee every single week and do this sort of thing.
Right.
So I just kind of walked away for a bit, but not forever because it's one of these things that never, it doesn't go away. In fact, like I said, I got a couple startups that I've done in the interim that, it's hard to walk away from this thing, especially when you love just starting and creating something new. So, but that was the motivation behind it.
Right. And I think, it's important. What you just stated is pretty important because I think at times, and I don't knock, I love hearing and seeing people of color and technology start their own business and things like that. But at times it almost seems as if people are presenting that as like the only way to do it, right? And I have a 9-to-5 and I love what I do, right? I love being a systems engineer, and there's nothing wrong with having a job, and it's a good thing to be able to start your own company and things like that. But I like to hear I guess more of a balanced approach to taking care of your family. Like you don't always have to. If it's not in the cards for you to start a startup, then it's just not in the cards. Having a job is perfectly okay. It's a viable way for you to take care of your family or whoever. So I think it's important that that you said that and that people get that. Technology isn't just you starting a company. There's tons of jobs where that you can get out here where you can make good money, and it will allow you to really take care of yourself, take care of your family, and help uplift the community if possible. So yeah, that's my spiel on that.
And when I made that decision, and it kind of goes back to our conversation tonight, is I felt like a failure. I felt like this thing ate me alive, and basically I didn't I didn't make my mark as far as doing something that I felt was something that that was remarkable, that, something that everyone was going to be talking about for years on. Although I guess that has happened, because I posted a thing on Instagram last week, and this guy literally reached out to me and said, because I made my Instagram public last week, and for a few days, I try to do that every once in a while so that people don't think I'm some weirdo trying to follow them. So this guy posts, I know it's kind of maybe I'm in my own head too much, but, I like to know what people are doing if they have a private account, like what's up. But,
right.
But this guy, reached out to me, and he goes, yeah, hey, I've been meaning to get in touch with you for a while. I read all about Aisle Finder, blah, 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 blah. And,
Oh, wow.
Hey, I have this thing. But this happened to me twice this week. You know what I mean? And it happens all the time. So I guess people are talking about it, but, I guess it'd be nice to get written up every once in a while as one of the big ones and all that stuff. But I've kind of had that time, and, I love that stuff too, but. Hmm?
Right. And it's funny that you mention that, because I've got two things to say on this. When I first started, first founded Blacks in Technology, I had a person who I talk with all the time, and so we were talking about, I guess we were talking about success and things like that, and she mentioned something about success, and she was talking about, she was talking about it in monetary terms, right? And I was just like, and she was basically saying that's the metric, that's the best metric you can use for success, right? For business or an organization or whatever. And and at the time I was just like, well, I still feel like that now. But what I said to her is, this is already a success to me, right? Like, I never dreamed at all that I would have, I didn't think I would have more than 150 members on the site, right? So once that was reached, I felt like this whole thing was a success, because I guess my goal was to bring together people of color in tech as part of a larger community, so that we can network and we can, have that visibility and things like that. So
mission accomplished. There you go.
Right. And so now I'm wondering, like, for you, like, is there added pressure because you're out in Silicon Valley and you're, kind of competing with, tons of people out there that are striving and shooting for the same exact thing that you're shooting for? Is there more pressure on you personally?
To a degree. I think that, what really kind of messes me up sometimes is where, I have this notebook full of ideas and, and startup ideas and business ideas and, and all that good stuff. And then I see that somebody's done it. And that's what kind of like, it just destroys me. Because I'm like, oh man, if only I had a little bit of time. But what I look at as the true currency now, and maybe this is just me getting old. I mean, I'm only 33, but maybe this is just me getting old. But I look at time as a bigger factor than money, because, is doing what I do, the money is always going to be there. I mean, I get so many leads on LinkedIn and just people just spamming me with like, hey, you want to come work in Wisconsin or wherever? Like that, and that's cool and all, but you know what I mean? I figure with the the thing that I've chose to do as far as a career, the money will be there, right? And this same idea that kind of got me into the startup thing, the money will be there, whether it's now or later. Now, whether I choose to go and get it now or when I'm older, I mean, that's up to me. Or maybe I'll get a little bit of that money and let somebody else pay the bills now, and then that way I stack my paper and then go and do what I'm going to do. But there's pressure all the time, because you see people that they're raising $1 million, $1 million rounds, and, they're having beer Fridays, and, they get an Uber car service to their job every single day, and their VCs really make sure that, they have a personal trainer, and you know what I mean? All this crazy stuff that it's like, whoa, you know what I mean? I could have that, but yeah, the currency for me is time. If I can buy more time, then that's fine. I mean, I don't mind losing money over more time.
Right. Right. So let's get into this whole thing about failure and rejection, and let's talk about that and why you think talking about it is important, and what do you think is missing in the conversation right now, or is there even a conversation about it?
I feel like there's conversations, right? But they're in they're in kind of the corners of the house, you know. You have, you know, big media outlets like TechCrunch and even Product Hunt and whatnot, and even Hacker News. And none of those, if you look at the top stories for, 20 pages, you'll see that none of these are about, failure. And they say that 9 out of 10 businesses in the U.S. is doomed for failure. It's almost like, well, and then on top of that, let me add another factor here, is that companies that are brand new, they are always looking for a hotshot rock star developer who's the best of the best to come on and code their project. And it's like, wait a minute, you mean that if I interview at 10 startups, 9 of those startups are doomed to fail? One of those is, you know what I mean? Those are not good odds if you think about it.
Right.
But those conversations aren't taking place right now. They're hinted at. I mean, TechCrunch has this Deadpool. You have other blogs that are like autopsy.io. That's another that's a site that I'm not a pessimist whatsoever. Let me say that first and foremost. I am as severe an optimist as you can get. But I'm always interested in, even with AisleFinder, there were people that did my idea years and years, decades before I did it. But I was more interested, not so much in how do I make this thing succeed. I was interested in doing my homework to find out, why did these people fail? What was the factor that made them not succeed? Because I want to avoid those traps. I want to not sidestep them, but I want to take those things appreciatively and try to understand how I can move past that obstacle, or figure out an obstacle just using my brain or sheer willpower. So that's what I feel like they're not talking about it yet. It's just not there yet. Forbes even does it. Forbes is huge, and they're talking about failure right now. That's on December 3rd. They did a big article about failure. So what does that tell you? It's huge. Right.
So when you were developing Alpha, what's some of the research that you did, and what are some of the results that you came up with in regards to why these other companies that had kind of the same idea, why they failed, and what did you take from that?
Well, so the first thing that I did was I get real. It's one of these situations where you hear about. You look at Cash Money Records. Okay, I'll make them an example, because what interested me about them is that what they did not know about the record industry, the music industry, is actually what helped them in a big way. Because they didn't know what, price of participation was. They didn't know how much of a record you are normally supposed to get if you're in a joint venture. They didn't know what it costs to market an album outside of the streets or the area that they were at. So there was a lot of things they didn't know. But one thing that they did know was how much that they wanted to make. They wanted to keep all their product. They wanted to be the sole rights holder for all of their content, all their music, and that was not negotiable. They weren't going to move on that, because they had a little cottage industry of supporting themselves and their families. So what did a record label like Universal did? What were they going to offer them that they couldn't do for themselves over time or whatnot? And and you look at that situation, you see that Universal, one of the biggest uh, music distributors and labels at the time caved in to these guys that were, from a ward that no one even heard of in New Orleans. So it just tells you that sometimes what you don't know can be just as strong as what you do know. And but I look at that as an example because I said, wow, okay, let me use knowledge to my advantage. And I thought I was real smart and real arrogant. So I would approach companies like Safeway and Kroger, and I would say, hey, you know what? You guys need this in your grocery store. You guys need a way for customers to find groceries very quickly. I was told so many times, no, no, no. And I didn't get any kind of feedback as to why. So then I started asking questions. I said, well, why not? And they would tell me, oh, well, somebody's already tried this. We tried this 10 years ago. Or, yeah, we thought about that, but, the reason we don't want to do it is because we want people to get lost in stores because people pay us a lot of money to put their things on a shelf for a certain price. Like those were things that, although I had some exposure in the grocery industry, I did not know at that time. So I had to kind of learn by bumping my head a little bit. And this is why a lot of folks had quit doing that idea because they said, well, this is impossible. I can't believe this. And then also a lot of that stuff was tried pre-internet. So it was like, okay, now we have the wisdom of crowds. We have people that are like Yelpers. They will contribute and add content, and they will stand by that content and maintain it. And you have all these kind of data custodians out there that would help with the product. And that's actually one of the ways that I think this thing has survived for so long is that people are adding content. They're saying, hey, this is the wrong aisle, or hey, this is in the wrong aisle here. It's in this aisle now,
Right.
There's just a lot of that. And, but what I took away from that was that, yeah, I mean, if you use information rather than just raw data to your advantage, then I think that you can really steamroll across any obstacles.
Gotcha. So, I have this thing when it comes to, so when people hear, kind of rejection and failure, automatically they think, negatively, right?
Sure.
And so I have this thing, right? So I have this thing, and this kind of deals with the way diversity is being talked about in technology nowadays. And it always seems, it always sounds to me in more from a negative standpoint as opposed to a solution-based standpoint, right? So, and what I mean by that is, and I'm not going to try to mention any names or anything like that, but for instance, somebody you might hear of a story of somebody quitting a job because of diversity issues, right? And so this article gets all types of big press and things like that, and the person is praised as a hero and things like that. But to me, it's like, well, what is that doing for us, right? Like, what is that doing for diversity? And I always want to take the stance of, let's talk more positively about the things that we can affect, or what things we can do to progress in technology. So, for instance, and I was, alluding to this earlier when we were talking before we started broadcasting. Like, we're working on a web series, and I think IDEA is actually doing something like this now, which I think is fantastic. It's a web series where you basically are sitting down in the Google Hangout type format, and you are talking about positive solutions to things. So one of our ideas is to do a web series based on getting hired, right? So
Mhm.
instead of getting, we're only 2% here and 2% at Twitter and 2% at Facebook, blah blah blah. We're talking to people who actually work there and saying, okay, how do you work there? How do you become employed at Twitter? How do you become employed at Google or Apple? Because I think that, to me, that could have a bigger impact than saying Twitter's not hiring us, right? Because it's like, okay,
Sure.
so why would I want to work at Twitter? Or why would I want to even get into tech if we're not welcome? That type of thing. And I feel that as an organization, our job is to encourage people to get into technology, not to discourage, because if we're putting out, article after article about how terrible tech is when it comes to diversity, and I'm not saying don't hold people accountable. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying there needs to be this balance to me, right? There needs to be this positivity
Sure.
about and solution-based type articles and messages put out there. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, how do we turn this rejection and failure into something solution-based? And what are some of the things that we can talk about that it's going to take the fear, I guess, out of failing and turning into more of a learning situation?
Well, when we're looking at the examples today, right, we see that, okay, there is a lot of talk, right, and there's even downright hard factual data that this is actually, the places are not diverse enough, so to speak. But then I ask the question of, what is diverse enough? I mean, that's the big question that no one really knows. And this is where it comes down to, okay, if 2% is not enough, which is pretty obvious if you have an 85% Caucasian or non-ethnic, or I want to say non-ethnic, you have 85% Caucasian engineers or employees there at whatever company, then you're gonna obviously be under a microscope. But then again, I look at these things and I say, okay, part of this is maybe a pipeline issue in the sense of, there's not enough exposure because, as I can only speak for the black experience because I'm a black man and, I've lived my whole life as a black man. But in a lot of ways, we are good users of technology, but we are not good creators. You know what I mean? We're not on the creative end. We don't, as much as we are in the media, we are not creating a lot of content, And as much as we're in tech, as much as we use technology, a lot of us are not the creators of that technology as well. So we have to look, we almost have to get the gumption for risk. I see that it's a difference in approach as well. The way that a lot of us were raised, it was where if we are going to do anything that's risky, we're risk averse. Let me put it that way. We're risk averse in a lot of ways, and a lot of these guys, and I've worked at startups, I've worked at big companies too, and I'll give my own experience, and this doesn't mean that it's every experience, but I will say this in my experience, is that I see young Caucasian males, they have no aversion to risk. They will sleep on a couch. They will sleep outside if they need to. They will sleep in a van if they need to. They will do whatever it takes. They will work long hours. They will do all these things in order to work for company X, okay? They'll do all those things. Now, could we could I say that same thing about myself? No, because I'm not willing to do whatever it takes. So that's why I'm not one of the creators of the technology that I use every day. That's why I'm not. But if it puts me in the game and there's some motivation for me, I'll do it because I'm driven to do that. You can't teach people to be driven, because the thing is, if you tell company X, Facebook, etc., Microsoft, whatever, that, hey, you haven't hired enough black people, their answer could very well be one day, well, where are the black people? You tell me where the black people are, and we will hire them. You know, and then what are we going to do? You know what I mean? What are we going to do then? And I won't even say, and I'll be honest with you in saying this, I would not even say that this is directly related to some sort of racism, because I've worked everywhere that I've worked here in the Bay Area. There is a high population of people of Indian descent, and and some of these people are, you know, you know, they are darker than me, to be honest. So I don't know. It may be a work ethic thing. It may just be that there's not enough people. I don't know. I feel like I sound like a fool when I talk about this, because for me, I just have a different experience, because it seems like every day everybody and their granduncle is trying to get me to come work at their company. And I'm like, they know that I'm black, right? So
right. That's not hard to nowadays. That's not hard to, you know, to figure. I mean, you've got LinkedIn. All you have to do is do a quick search, and most people.
Yeah. So I can't speak directly to being rejected in that way, except to say this. Recently, I posted on my Facebook and my Instagram two things. There were follow-up email from jobs that I had not jobs that I had, but jobs that I had interviewed for at Apple and even Google. Okay, so here's the background a little bit. So every month and a half, I get contacted by some recruiters, right? And some of these are long-term contracts, like 18 months, 2 years, 6 months, 1 year, et cetera. And I can count them on two hands how many times I've been contacted by Google and or Apple. Okay. And I've had at least 5 interviews at Apple. I've had at least 7 interviews at Google. Okay. I'm talking about like long day in, day out. Hey, come back tomorrow or next week. We want to take you through another round and this sort of thing. Like very far interviews. So, so having that experience and then being rejected even by saying, because it would get very far, but then there would be always something like, oh, this algorithm is a little bit off, or, it's big O notation, 6, or, you know what I mean? It's just some little odd little thing that trips me up, or, or just maybe they didn't like my face. I don't know. But it gets pretty far enough for them to make that decision. So I wouldn't say that the problem lies with those companies, because from what I'm understanding as well, only 2 to 5% of the folks that even interview there get hired. And I don't know if that background matches or they're doing some sort of pattern matching. I don't know. But I'm not one of those people. And I don't get upset when that happens, because I just kind of do that dance. And in my mind, the whole time I'm there drawing on the whiteboard and answering these dumb questions that I've been asked 15 times, the whole time I'm thinking is, I know I'm good enough to work here, okay? So we don't even have to do this, and why are we even playing around here, And I get in my car and I drive back home, and I don't really wait by the phone. I just kind of, all right, well, that happened, and at least I learn a little something new every time I interview about those companies, because they obviously have an eye for me, because I must be high on the DICE or Monster or LinkedIn list, because every recruiter and their uncle contacted me. So, I know that's a long-winded answer to how do I view that, but really, I don't know how to view it. I don't know if there's even a solution. I think if we're really looking at not hiring someone based on their skin or their background, then just do blind candidate research. Look at resumes only. Don't even look at the name, and then you'll find someone. I mean, if that is a solution, then you know what I mean. And then they'll be stuck with that person. They'll say, oh, "Okay, well, we don't know that he is Octavius Spencer Johnson the fourth." We don't. We just see a skill set. You know what I mean? Lazarius You know, I mean, you just don't know, man. But I say that because, hey, man, I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm a black man. I love black people, man. I do. I mean, I just don't. I mean, I don't know. Sometimes, man, I think sometimes we trip ourselves up too. But you know what? I don't care. I love all black people, man. And if we can get in somewhere, it's all good. I've had the privilege of working at big companies, working at Verizon, man, and I think that's a very diverse atmosphere. Gap also, you would think that nothing but like preppy, little lily white folks work there. But there are so many, I mean, there are so many black and Indian and Hispanic and Asian folks that work there. I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, they just have, and that's the thing. I think maybe those numbers are you know, are very specific, but maybe they are working in all one department, or I don't know what. I just don't know. But but yeah, I mean, I don't even know what to say, man.
Right.
It's just one of those things where you got to hang in there.
And so it's funny that you mention that, because my experience in technology as far as employment has always been pretty positive. Like I'm not going to say I've never had an issue, but I've never went to a job interview and felt like I didn't have a chance, right? And then maybe that's just me. Maybe it's, but it's you know, and sometimes, you know, I already have a job, so if I go interview somewhere else, maybe it's just me being more lax about interviewing and things like that. But I've gotten quite you know, I get recruiters calling me every single day. As a matter of fact, today I just had to erase like 24 messages. Over 90% of them were recruiters calling about a specific job, a network engineering, a systems engineering, or something. And so, and this is not to say that, you know, these things don't happen and people aren't experiencing this. For me, I would rather focus on helping people to overcome some of these obstacles that they're facing, and have a little bit more confidence in being prepared for entering the workforce, or for, you know, interviewing at the specific place, as opposed to they don't want you here. That to me is more impactful.
Yeah, I think that messaging is wrong, because you know, you know, and I think that's the narrative, is that they don't want you here. Don't ever come work here. And that's not, I don't feel like that's even accurate. I think that maybe part of this too is, and here's where I kind of encourage people to look at where their news is coming from, right? We have a lot of sensationalism in the media, and they're looking for little things to kind of shame people and make them feel like, yeah, you made $1 billion, but you know, you didn't hire any black people, or you didn't hire any transgender. I mean, you just have all kinds. Like, everybody can't get their way. That's what the lesson that my auntie used to teach me. Everybody can't get their way all the time. You have to just be patient, you know, and you have to also realize that the world and everything in it does not revolve around you and your little group or your forum or whatever. You have to just realize that, hey, maybe this isn't right for me or whatnot. And I think some people these days, they just don't get it, that it's not all about you. Like, other people need a chance to do things too. You know what I mean? It's
right.
I tell you, it's exhausting sometimes.
Definitely. I definitely agree. So what are give us some tips on ways that, you know, people can handle rejection, and also, like, kind of touch on I guess what ways that are you using rejection to kind of be more successful?
Well,
rejection, I should say.
So, one thing that I've done, once again, when I stopped doing Aisle Finder, I just felt like a total loser, like, man, I failed, and I don't have much to show for it. And
right.
Yeah, I can take my wife on a vacation here and there, but it's nothing like, you know what I mean? I don't have big zeros parked in my bank account or anything like that, but I do have a lot more time, and I do have a lot more resources. And one thing that I took that kind of rejection from, one thing that I took away from that is that all the gigs that I've had since have all been because I knew how to run a company and build a product from nothing to something.
Right.
Like I did all the development, the design, the product management, the whole nine. And I realized that the workforce that is working today, that just got out of college and they have no experience in the real world, or even they have years of working at a place but have no product experience, that was something that was a missing key for a lot of these companies. So that's what I get called in to do. They're almost like, I get called in now when projects are at a standstill, where there's just no way out of it, and they need somebody to kind of pull off the impossible in a short amount of time. And that's what I did at Stanford. That's what I did at Gap. That's at Verizon, it's different. They already had a lot of stuff already done.
Right.
But I came in to kind of add my little dash of pepper and salt, and man, I mean, they're just really great to work with. So I took those things and made a whole little cottage industry out of it. But I've also done startups on the side, and I've also advised a number of startups that one of them I'm not working with anymore, but I have like 4 startups that I'm advising right now, and they're all kind of early stage and kind of trying to build product, and they're trying to do things that I never did, like actually meet with VCs and walk away with a check. I think I did the meet with VCs thing, but I was never, and this is going to sound weird, but I was never about getting venture capital to foot the bill for any of the products that I built, because it just never, for me, that's my personal decision. I just never I felt like this is a business that it had to stand on its own. If it didn't, then it wasn't a business to me. And so that's kind of what I did. And so I'm trying to get them through the pitching process and, coaching them with that, coaching them on product, how to wow investors, how to make a big impact and market their product as well, how to get written about, how to write and craft their own narrative and their own story, which I think is extremely crucial for any startup these days, is to not growth hacks or any crap like that, because I think that that's a bunch of garbage. I think if you have a solid story, you don't need any of that stuff. And
what is that for our startup impaired people like me? I don't know all the startup lingo. So,
well, like growth hacks are these things where people are like, well, if you post on this blog and then you get 15 people to, write about it, and then you know what I mean? You do these kind of things where it's not like dark tips or anything, but they're trying to make a science out of it. Like as if the thing that we all don't relate to are stories. When we boil it down, if you don't have a story, then people will not connect to you. Facebook has a story. Hey, it is a place for your friends, your college roommates, your people you haven't seen in a long time. Instagram has a story, right? Twitter has a story, 140 characters, and you're all done, right?
Right.
Like these are short stories, but they have stories. And I think that there's people out there that are trying to like say, well, if we do this, we're going to have more people, and more people equals this, and more people, and there's just not a science. It's not organic. It's just like, let me juice up the number. Let me put steroids into this thing and see how far we can get in a short amount of time. But then we'll have so much drop off that, we won't even be able to handle the bad times when this business tanks. And And not to say that some people aren't good at that, at marketing, but I just hate these kind of like even SEO. I think that that's good. I think that that is perfectly fine because that at least shows that, you know, you're trying to focus on what your product is about and you're trying to lead people to your product in a way. But when you start doing things like, well, let me pay for 15 articles to be written and then let me also do the, you know what I mean? You're doing all these crazy BuzzFeed listicle type of things, and you know, it just gets in the way after a while.
Right.
So, I don't know. Maybe I just have a slanted opinion now because, you know, I always believe that the more genuine you are, the more genuine followers and people you're going to have. And that's just how I do my thing on social media as well. I try to be as genuine as possible without being like, hey, buy my stuff and do my thing and sign up for my thing, you know?
Right. And I guess I can attest to that because, you know, when I founded Blacks in Technology, you know, I do a lot of systems engineering stuff, but it's you know, that stuff is back end infrastructure stuff, right? So even the whole, you know, the web and SEO and all that stuff was totally new to me. And there were a lot of people talking about SEO, definitely around that time. It was like SEO was the thing, and I was just like, what's SEO? And, oh, you need to be doing this and this and this and this and this. And I was just like, yeah, that sounds like too much work for me. I already have enough on my plate to be doing. And, you know, and I just let things grow organically. And when people came to the site, I connected with them. You know, I reached out to them. You know, we had a conversation. You know, I told people about the vision for Blacks in Technology, and it was more of a genuine interaction as opposed to, you know, let's try to bump up the numbers and through SEO and gain people that way. And maybe, you know, for me, I like it to be more genuine, and I'm like you in those terms. I like that. It doesn't seem like a robot, and it doesn't seem mechanical. It's you know, it's definitely more organic and a lot more genuine. So,
but who knows? In a year, in a year from now, I may look like a total loser for even saying that. They're like, "What do you mean you don't do growth hacks, old man?" You know, I mean, who knows? But but you know, I'm willing to be wrong right now, or I'm willing to be right now. And if I'm wrong later, then hey, I'll come up to that. But I just right now, I just feel like there's a lot of this kind of spammy crap where you kind of know the end of the punchline, right? You're like, okay, I know what comes next. Once I sign up, I get 50 emails, you know, every single day, and I get, you know, a bunch of tweets and all this kind of crazy stuff. So, you know, you know, I get that these are the things it takes to kind of try to run a business these days. But, you know, there just comes a time where people ignore you because they're like, why do I need to, I get 50 of these emails a day. I don't need to pay attention to one of them, you know, or then it becomes, why am I getting these? Just send them directly to the spam box, and that's that, you know. So, you know, it becomes one of these things that people will do without even thinking about it. So
definitely.
Yeah.
So what are some of the things? So you say you help advise startups and of that nature. And so what are some of the common things that you're running into where, you know, they may be failing at or having a hard time with it, that you come in and with your experience and with your startups that you're able to help them with?
Mostly team issues. Well, I'll put this at the top line of it. So it's team issues, it's exit strategy, and always, I mean, the old standby is venture capital. I mean, it's almost like the first thing that comes out of their mouth is, we want to raise $50 million at this rate. And I mean, they have all this figured out before they even have a product. So, and that's cool. I mean, look, it's good to be ambitious because that's what this business takes. So team issues, of course, you know, people talking behind each other's back and they're trying to say, well, we have a guy that he already owns 30% of the company, and he wants to go and do another project with another guy in the company that owns 10%. They're going to walk away with 40% of the company. What should I do? And it's like, let them go, basically. Or,
right.
It's one of these things where even, they've already figured out how they're going to raise X amount of millions of dollars, but they haven't figured out what a vesting schedule is either. And for those that are listening, a vesting schedule is where if Greg, you and I, if we started a business, it would be assumed that you and I are 50-50 partners, right? You own 50%, and then I own 50%, right?
All right.
That's kind of, that's like a gentleman's shake, right?
Right.
Wrong. So the best thing for a new company, and you don't know whose interest is all aligned, is for if you and I were going to start a company, Greg, you and I, we should say, okay, Greg, we're going to start this company. Let's both start at 5%, okay? And in 4 years, we will own 50% of the company or whatever agreed upon percentage of the company is that you guys say you want to own in the end. And a lot of things can happen within 2 years or 4 years, but you're going to say, look, if things steady on and I stay with the company and I continue to make milestones in this company, I'm going to want 50% eventually, okay?
Right.
So we start off down that path, and in 2 years, if I'm with the company, Greg, and then I get my 50%. Now, Greg, if you walked away at, year 2, then you would have whatever we agreed to on year 2. And that's it. Your vesting would stop, essentially. So you would say, so let me back this up to make it really, really simple, okay? So I'm getting ahead of myself. So let's say 5 years, okay? Let's say in 5 years, Greg, you own 50% of the company, and I will own the other 50% of that company, okay? But we will both start at 10% on year 1. And then at year 2, we will each be at 20%, okay? Year 3, 30%, year 4, 40%, and then at year 5, 50% for the both of us, okay? Now, let's say, Greg, you decided to leave the company at year 2 after you vested, meaning that you're at the year 2 marker and you just got 20% of the company, okay? You can say, not for me anymore. I'm just going to go my way, and I will own this amount of stock. And you can buy it from me at a certain price that we agreed to in the beginning, but I'm not going to sell it for any less than that, And, like you can tailor that to what you feel is going to happen in the business. But the thing about it is no one really knows what's going to happen in the business. So you have to kind of use your future goggles a little bit and say, well, look, no matter what, if we get a VC in here, they're going to want, or you have to decide kind of, okay, we're going to sell 30% of this company. Just let's leave a 30% option pool where basically we can invite VCs to have a taste of this company, and we can sell it to them at a certain price. Okay, that will kind of keep your piece kind of safely tucked away a little bit. So a lot of these companies that end up giving so much of the company away are ones that are not structured this way. And so that's why you have people that are like, what do you mean I own 4.2%? I own 50% of this company when we started. And it's like, well, yeah, everything dilutes and, you invited more investors, you got greedy or whatever, you know what I mean? Like things happen.
Right.
So everybody takes a hit on that. And until, if you're the one drawing the short straw, you're pretty much diminished after a while. So, you have to look at things from that angle. So that's one big issue is people wanting to walk away or teaming up and then trying to walk away. Obviously, the VC thing where they're like, we want to raise $50 million. And I'm like, well, what are you going to do with that $50 million? And they say, well, buy a house for my mama and go on a trip. And you know what I mean? Like very unrealistic kind of requisites for capital.
Is that what you're hearing from people who
Absolutely.
saying,
Absolutely.
Wow.
They're saying I want to. I mean, even other stuff like they'll say, well, I want to buy a house so that I can have all my college buddies come, and then we can start a startup out of that. And it's like, well, wait, you're in this startup. Well, what do you, like, they just look at it as the payoff instead of, hey, that means that we got to, because one thing VCs hate is where you take all this money and then you don't spend it, because they'll be like, well, hey, that's not fiscally responsible at all, because you took all this money from us and we want a return on it. And if you don't spend it, then there's no return. You're just holding on to our money, and we have expectations as well. So, so those things happen. And then, some other things that, and sometimes you have to kind of set the record straight, and it's good to have somebody that's not invested yet to say, hey, you guys need to put this down on paper and think realistically. Because everybody should have handcuffs to that business for at least the first 3 years. And then after 3 years, you guys can decide whether you want to stay in or not. By that time, you're sick of each other, and bands break up, and they're usually over money or girls. And startups are much the same. Startups are much the same. It's money and vacation money, or I don't want to say women, but I'm sure that's happened down the line somewhere. Right. But yeah, those are the things. So it's definitely that, the walking away with money. Those are the founder issues, and then VCs, and then just not knowing how to pitch too. Oh my goodness, there's just I should be like a pitch doctor, because a lot of these folks get so tied to their notes, they don't know how to just be human and talk as if like they're not robots. They're like, let me look at the slide deck and I will tell you exactly what it says. It's like, no. Right. What does your brain say?
Well, so where do you think that where do you think something like that comes from? Like, is it because of the culture of the startup life that people feel that they have to be more scripted as opposed to,
they think they're brilliant sitting down and creating this slide deck. That's the thing. You see so many brilliant founders putting together slide decks, but when they get in front of a crowd, they just get so petrified that they don't even have words for what they're even talking about. They're just like, a VC will ask them, well, what's your plan if so-and-so gets in this game? And they'll say, we haven't really thought about it. Well, what do you mean? It's on your slide that's right behind you. What are you talking about? They lose the sense of trying to understand and relay what they're really trying to say. So, and that happens, but after a while, the ones that are tenacious and keep going, those are the ones that end up getting capital, because a lot of times they want to hear. VCs have no what they call a crystal ball, right? No one knows what the future is gonna hold, but they want to at least have an idea that, hey, even if the future has uncertainties, they want to know that you're the person that they're putting in charge of their money to invest it properly and to give a return on. And that's what they mean by they look at the founder first. They want to know that you're trustworthy and that you have some sort of head on your shoulders to get things done and to whip your team into shape.
Gotcha. I want to kind of circle back to something just kind of popped in my head, something that you mentioned earlier, it was basically where you basically were talking about. Now, did I just lose it? Of course. It was. What was that? You were talking about. You just kind of mentioned it.
Raising capital?
No, not raising
Founder
capital. Earlier in the podcast, and it was something that I wanted to touch on. I should have wrote it down. It had to do with rejection, and I'll find her. What was it? Think. Okay.
Oh, maybe pitching? Maybe pitching?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't pitching. It was. Oh, Jesus. Yeah. Total brain fart right now.
I'm sure you remember it and be like, that was it, you know. But
right. Right. So,
yeah, I mean,
give us. No problem. So give us some. What are some of your tips about handling rejection or failure? As far as what are some of the things that you could say? If you're up against this, or if you, what that question is right on the tip of my tongue, and I cannot get it out. But give us some of your.
How do you handle rejection? Easily, no. I always kind of go back to my my training as an artist, because I still look at things with artist eyes.
Okay.
A lot of.
What do you mean by that?
I look at, when I say artist eyes, I'm meaning from the standpoint of, a lot of different mediums, meaning that when I look at how to paint something, I know that I need to put an underpainting underneath to make sure that my structure is there. Then I look at it, I blur my eyes a little bit so I can see if it has composition. You know what I mean? I look at things not so analytical, but does it make sense, Does it make sense to me? And do I like it? And so I look at things from that angle a lot. But from the rejection standpoint, being an artist, that is just your life. You're going to face all kinds of rejection because there's going to be people that don't like your art. There's going to be people that don't like the way you do your paint strokes, or they don't like the way you draw. Like a good friend of mine, Rob Liefeld, people say he's actually the most popular and the most successful comic book artist in the world, period. Okay. And people say he can't draw feet, but I'm like, 7+ million comics later, he can't draw feet. But, it's like, think about what you're saying for a minute. He must know because he sold so many comics. And he has a movie coming out about the comic book character he just put. So it's like, who's right on this,
Right.
Who's really right on this? Is it you, who's never created anything and don't have a movie coming out about anything you've created? Or a guy who drew this character and, and you say he doesn't have feet and the movie's coming out and he's hanging out with stars that you would never in your life meet. So who's right on that one? I don't know. I mean, I'll let you think on that. But you just have to kind of, and this is where it comes down to, you can be right in your own head. And that doesn't mean have a big ego. That just means that be confident in yourself because you're going to face rejection. That's just part of life. A girl doesn't like the way you look, she's going to reject you. People don't like what you're wearing, they're going to ignore you. You don't like the number that's on the scale, well, you're going to go work out. You know what I mean? Like you have all these mini rejections and judgments all in your head every day. Now, what you act on is important. And, for me, I've always looked at rejection as, they had something to say. Because it's almost good to, when I judge hackathons and there's nothing to say about a startup or an idea, then that basically means I don't understand it or it's something that just doesn't appeal to me. But
interesting.
And that's how a lot of folks are, where they don't have much to say if it doesn't appeal to them or they don't feel like it fits in a box for them or their life. So I just look at those things and I don't worry about the messenger. I worry about the message a lot, which is hard sometimes, but I mean, that's just life. When I was in the NUMI Accelerator, we had people coming in and hearing our ideas and hearing our startups a lot. And it almost makes you bulletproof because you hear so much rejection that you're almost attuned to it. You don't care so much. You care about, okay, what's wrong with it? You know, I'd rather hear what's wrong with something before I hear what's great with something. Because I already feel it's great if I'm showing it to someone. Now tell me, what would you do different, or what do you think the criticism is? You know, so that's how I deal with it. It never gets easier. That's just life. I mean, we get rejected all the time, so we just have to persevere. That's the biggest thing. You can be deterred. There was a woman I spoke to yesterday. I'll make this story very brief. There's a woman I talked to yesterday out of Atlanta, Georgia, and she told me a story about how she created this really awesome product for a big retailer, and basically they copied her designs and all that stuff. They copied all the things that make the app successful, and then they didn't cut her in or anything. And she was the one that introduced them to the concept. So it was things like that. And I just told her, you know, she kept mentioning it in our conversation. And mind you, this is our first conversation. You know, she asked, she liked what I did with the aisle finder, and so she was interested. So I just told her, I said, stop telling that victim story. I said, because you know what? I said, it doesn't matter. What are you going to do next? What you're going to let that define you, or are you going to do something that defines you next? You know, I said, I know that's hard to take because you've been wearing that like a badge of honor. But, you know, this is a Dr. Phil moment to a sense, because you have to kind of stop with that stuff. Stop being a victim and start, you know, start doing something. Anything is better than sitting there talking about, well, I sued them and they did this. And, you know, I don't like that kind of stuff. And I know people are hurt in different ways, but we just have to persevere, because it will never work out if we sit there and play the victim all the time.
I agree, and I'm not going to turn this into one of my pet peeves about the diversity talk, but if you. I kind of agree, and not to say that people are everybody is doing that, but like I said earlier, I'd rather focus on what we can do to progress, and I mean, and to me, that's what the big community is to me. It's a support system, right? So it's not, you know, it's where we come to in order to help each other, give advice to each other, help each other become better, you know, lift each other's spirits.
I still don't think there's enough of that.
I don't either.
I still don't feel like there. I feel like even out here, I feel like there's just not enough stuff for us to do and be together on. Because, I mean, if you think about it, every conference out here costs so much money to do. And then, you know, they have parties around and all that. So it's like not everybody can do all that. But then again, you know, you have groups like Onyx, which is one group that I've been to only one time. I'm sorry, Lakeisha. But, you know, you have all these different groups out there that are doing something about it, and they're not, you know, they're relentless about it, which is great. And that's one thing that I can appreciate, is that, you know, at least people are trying to do something. In fact, the next project that I'm doing, it actually kind of focuses on stories that have not really been told, as far as people that have had some sort of success early in their career or even during their career. And, you know, the stories are just never being told. So,
interesting.
You know, it's not just Black entrepreneurs. It's from all kinds of backgrounds, really. There's just, it's hard to put a finger on it, because I've talked to so many people, and to get some of these conversations just even videoed, I was about to say videotaped, but to get any of these filmed, you know, come on, put it on videotape for the interweb. You know, but yeah, you know, I mean, we can talk about it a lot, but you know, it means more that we do, because even myself, I don't feel like I've done enough. I'm very kind of, I'm almost like, I had a guy that I hadn't talked to in years, he's all, "You're like a brown recluse," and I was like, "What?" I said, "What does that mean?" But it offended me at first because I'm like, "Whatever, man," But I
Are you talking about the spider?
Away. Yeah,
the brown recluse spider.
Yeah, and I was just kind of like, okay, I guess. But I like doing stuff very solitarily. I make ties. I do stuff like that. I don't need to kind of be out and about, hanging out with people. But I'll do it if it. You know what I mean? If
you make salads.
Yes, I do. I do make salads. I
had
to lose a bunch of weight, man. I had to lose a bunch of weight, man. That's another thing that happened. I was pre-diabetic. Well, I'm still pre-diabetic, so to speak, but, I don't want to, I don't want this to be my life. You know what I mean? I don't want to live my life to be, overweight and all this stuff. So, so those are things that when I had a break from Mildfighter, I decided that I was going to do instead of delaying and not doing anymore. I needed to really put me and my family back in focus and try to be optimal, try to be here, because if I work myself to death, then somebody else is going to be kissing on my beautiful wife and living in my house and driving my car, and you know what I mean?
Right.
It's just one of these things that it's like, my ego won't let it happen. No, but no. They tried to take my wife. No.
That's funny.
No, but it's just one of these things. We all got to adapt. But like I said, I've done a few other startups on my own. That I'm actually working on one right now. So I think the game is actually going to change with this one because it's actually an enterprise product.
Oh wow!
So
I don't see a lot of. What's funny is I don't see a lot of that coming from us.
Exactly.
I don't know why. I listen to a lot of tech podcasts, right? Mm-hmm. And there's a couple of things that kind of gets under my skin is when it comes to people of color in startups, and I know that when it comes to it seems like there's almost sometimes like this elitist type attitude as far as what startups go, and you should be creating a startup. If you're not creating a startup, you're not doing anything. That type thing.
You're worthless.
I don't. Right, and I don't like that. But like I said, I like the balance. I like people. I like that people are out there creating startups, and that's a good narrative to have as far as we need more startups coming from people of color. But I don't like that like it's the only way. And when I listen to these tech podcasts, I hear about a lot of tech startups, right, that are solving like enterprise needs or that are solving some type of tech shortcoming, so to speak. So, for instance, like there might be a product coming out in something that has to do with virtualization, and it solves a certain problem within virtualization that a particular product didn't solve before. But the way that they were able to come up with that is because they worked for one of these big companies, right?
Yeah.
And so it I guess when I hear stuff, when I hear people kind of talking like 9 to 5 is not the way. It's just like you can come up with some great ideas if you work in these environments and see where things are not working, or you see some of their failings or where things can be improved. You can actually spin off your own idea from that, because I hear it all the time from on these tech startups or from these tech podcasts. People previously working at VMware, or they used to work at EMC, or they used to work at insert any big tech company name here, and found out, there's a market for this because they weren't doing it properly. They didn't do it at all. And so they go out and they create their own startup.
Oh yeah. And, one thing that's interesting is that talking to, I'll say this, there's a because I don't want them to be all butthurt that I'm mentioning them. Let's just say a large social network that that is global. I recently had a long conversation with them about possibly coming over and doing some stuff there. But one thing that was really the focus of the conversation was the fact that I had enterprise experience, doing different things for the enterprise. So, and the same thing for a couple other startups that I've kind of talked to. It's like, that's what they're looking. They're looking for people that have done the tried and true. They've worked at big companies. They know how Microsoft works. They know how Google works or whoever works. They want to bring some of that in-house. In fact, there's a guy that I worked with at PG&E, which is like a huge gas energy conglomerate. All those people, I mean, they were trying to hire in people that were young and worked at startups so that they can get some of that culture inside. So it's just one of these opposites attract type of thing where they want structure in these companies after they've done the whole beer Fridays and ping pong tables,
Right. Yeah. Hey, so I want to end this podcast on the question that I thought I forgot. It came to me. So you were mentioning earlier in the podcast about sometimes you got kind of down on yourself when you had this notebook of ideas, and then all of a sudden you find out somebody was kind of first to market with it. How would you? What advice can you give people? Because I experienced that too, especially when it comes to like ideas that I have for Blacks in Technology, and then all of a sudden I see another organization that's in this space, and they're doing the same thing, and I'm just like, oh man.
You know what's funny that you say that? Because when I was on your show, was it almost 5 years ago? It's almost like you were the only podcast that was specifically talking to our audience, right? And I thought, wow, this is really great. But now there's so many kind of copycats, I'll call them that straight up, because there's just a lot of kind of, they riffed off of what you've established, kind of like what people are doing with Oprah, like, okay, Oprah has a tried and true model, and every show is kind of modeled after that now. But
So how did you deal with that? Too. I mean, how do you? Well, when it comes to people, and when doing something like a podcast or even back then, I when I first started Blacks in Technology, I didn't see a lot of content at all on the web about people of color in tech, and now I see quite a few. But my position on that is because we don't have enough of it from my standpoint. Not right now, right? So the more I see, the better. So you've got what Two Black Nerds podcast. You've got of 10 podcasts.
I don't think I've ever heard of him.
Really?
Two Black Nerds? Yeah, I got to check it out.
I'm pretty sure it's called Two Black Nerds. You got of 10 podcasts with Will
Lucas.
Like
that. Now, those aren't copycats, though. That's the thing. Those aren't copycats.
No. I wasn't referring. I'm just saying as far as having content out there, featuring, with people of color as being the host and people of color, or the content being focused towards people. I love that because I don't, at the time when I first started, it seemed like, at least to me, like I was the only one. And so I always encourage people to do a podcast or do a blog or do whatever you can do to increase the visibility. But I guess what I'm saying is, like, there are ideas that I've had for Blacks in Technology, and I've seen other people get to it before I got to it. And I know you mentioned that earlier in the podcast. So how did you deal with that and that whole thing?
Well, personally, here's what I do each time one of these projects gets launched, and I'm sitting over my notebook in shame. I basically log on to I basically log on to Facebook or Twitter, and then I go social justice warrior on them. No, I'm just like, no, I just, no, I don't do any of that. I mean, it's one of these things where, okay, I analyze that for about a week, right? Because what I'm trying to see is how similar and how off the mark are they? Because if it's one thing to say, well, they're doing something similar, but if you feel like, wow, you know, you can still do your idea, that'd be awesome. Because if they're missing a big piece, you can either say, well, hey, look, I really like this space, guys, and just send them an email. Or if they're a brand new company, that means that their inboxes probably have 5 or 6 emails in them, max, period, you know? And that means that you're going to get high visibility with them. So, you know, if nothing else, you can contact them and say, you know, I had this. I'm telling you what happens to me, right? If you go and look, there's a YouTube video out there of me in an interview with Robert Scoble, and literally there's in the comment thread, there's like 15 people or something that say, I had that idea 10 years ago, you know, and it's like, man, but that's the thing about good ideas is that there's people that have them, but the execution is the factor. One thing that I do is, you know, if it's an idea that I really felt passionate about, or, you know, I'll just send an email and say, wow, you know what, guys, this is a great idea. You know, I have these little notes in my notebook. I hope that they add value to you guys. You know, I think that you guys can approach it from this way and that way. And you're not coming to them as some arrogant fool. You're just saying, hey, look, you know what? You got there first. Here, let me give you some game. If it helps, cool. If not, then it doesn't. But at least let's make a connection. Let's try to get in each other's ears. Let's meet for coffee. You know, all of these things what's funny about it is that's actually how one of the companies that I'm advising, how I got in contact with them. Because, and the only reason I'm even advising them is because I felt like when they originally launched, they didn't have everything that I had kind of done some research on. And I felt like, okay, I can either be against them and be like, forget them. But I didn't. I just said, let me, you know, hey, man, if they, I mean, I'm not going to be able to get to this idea. And I'm not truly passionate about it, but it's something I know a little something about. So let me put this bug in their ear and see if they like it, cool. If they want help with it, hey, I'm here too. I have skills here, and I've done this before. So, you know, those are factors. Those are things that you can do, right? The other thing to prevent that from happening, one thing that you should do is years ago when I was doing a project for Microsoft is, you know, there was all this buzz and talk about how Bill Gates takes these 3 or 2 weeks off every year. He takes 2 weeks and he like reads books and he comes up with new ideas. He just completely unplugs basically from the company and everything. But he does this every year, and he comes up with all these crazy cool ideas, and then he brings them back to the company, and they try to implement or they try to think about which ones have real steam and are going somewhere. And since then, I've kind of thought about it too. I mean, even if you're not a billionaire, you can do that sort of thing. You can go to a hackathon for a weekend and really be immersed in that hackathon, meaning that, you know, you can go up to San Francisco, rent a hotel room for $150 a night, hopefully, and say, I'm going to do this hackathon and I'm going to build a rough prototype of my startup. I'm going to do that. And I'm going to do that this weekend, and that's all I'm going to do. Okay? Even if you need to get away from your significant other and, you know, tell them I love you. Hey, I'm going to the city, or I'm going to, you know, the city outside of here so that I can focus and do things like that. Writers do this all the time. They get away to do this sort of thing all the time. So if you're going to do this thing and you're really serious and you're motivated to do it, you might as well buy out the time to do it, because I like that. If you keep saying you're going to do it one day, it'll just be too late. And that's why you have so many of these Instagram clones, you know. Remember when there were so many Instagram clones? Like, everywhere you looked in the App Store, it was like, oh, we're Instagram too. It's because everybody had that idea, but they never executed on it until somebody got there, made billions of dollars, or, you know, they had the premise of making billions of dollars, and then they executed on it. So,
interesting.
So that was one guy. That was Kevin Systrom, right? And he had a small band of people, grew it to 12, and that was that. Call it a day. You know, Facebook, they probably put 2 engineers on that and like, yeah, all right, I guess it's time to update Instagram, you know, you know, because it's not heavy, you know, if you think about it, it's not a heavy app, you know, it's not like you need a lot of, I mean, there's literally probably, you have your screen page, you have maybe 4 or 5 views, right? That's it. And that app is done. There's not a lot to it. You know, it's the same kind of concept. You could probably create Instagram today, but it won't be Instagram. so quit while you're ahead. Like, the other thing is, don't create a derivative, you know. Be risky. Be risky. That's my biggest advice, is be risky. Do stuff that people aren't doing. Don't do things that are obvious, right? Like, you know, like Aisle Finder itself was pretty obvious, but it was risky too because no one had done it inside of an app. Even my competitors, we launched in the same month, so that tells you that it was all risk on both fronts for both of us. So, you know, and we only had one competitor, and we still have one competitor. So, I mean, that tells me a lot. So if I put up the juice on Aisle Finder, if I decided, hey, I'm going to come back in style like LL Cool J in the early 90s, then that's it. Lights out, you know? So, and I'm confident enough to do it because I've been stewing on it and thinking about how can I just, you know, in business, you got to be prepared to kind of destroy the competition. I know that sounds mean or crafty or whatever, but if you don't think that way, then you're not in business. You're playing with it. That's it. So I just look at it from that standpoint. If you're not in it to win it, then just sit back, relax, and, you know, watch as everything else unfolds. So that's how I deal with it, man. That's a good way to deal with it is if you have time, if you have a weekend, which a weekend is not hard to come by. It happens every 5 days. You know, go and check into, you know, instead of going and eating waffles on Saturday morning or whatever you do, or walking your dog or whatever, you know, or, you know, just take one weekend for yourself and say, I'm going to do my own hackathon, and I'm going to check into, you know, a Holiday Inn or a cheap motel, Fleabag Motel, and I'm going to work on this nonstop. You know, I'm going to be out of my element. I'm not going to sit in my living room and try to get it done because, you know, the TV's there and all that stuff. Or you can say, I'm just going to hold a residency at my local coffee shop, and that's all I'm going to do on the weekend. You know, but I'm going to give myself only one weekend to execute, not 50 weekends, and then I'm figuring out how to get this thing done. Like, give yourself one weekend. If it can't be done in a weekend or with an Excel spreadsheet or with a simple web page, then you're trying too hard at it, because even the simplest apps and websites out there started with those basic premises.
Interesting. Well, Curtis, this is definitely...
And read the book.
Go ahead. What are you reading lately?
So check this out. So I read books that are about I'm not a music person at all. I don't play an instrument. I don't do any of that kind of stuff. But there are personalities in music that I look at their success and I wonder how they got there. One person that I've actually kind of been looking at is Gene Simmons. He's from this band called Kiss. They're pretty big. But I say that because maybe, I don't know, some people don't really know who that is. They're like, Kiss? What are you? There's another, I say Gene Simmons, I'm sorry, wrong book. Paul Stanley is his name. Okay. So Paul Stanley is kind of, he's the second
drummer,
popular
right?
guy. No, he's a guitarist. So he's the star child in Kiss. Yeah.
Okay.
So he has a book out that, let me look through my Audible real quick. I can tell you exactly what it's called because I'm knee deep in it right now. Don't you hate that when you look at it and when you're like, okay, what am I reading? I don't know. So okay, but while I'm looking for
titles aren't important.
No. It is important because it's actually pretty interesting, his story, because a lot of that's what it's called, Face the Music, A Life Exposed. I knew it was like Face something.
Right.
It's called Face the Music, A Life Exposed. Now that is a good book because it not only talks about how he's the real brains behind Kiss, but it talks about what things he had to sacrifice to be successful. Even one of the weirdest things that this book has kind of told me about him is that he was saying, if you want to be successful, you got to get rid of your women. Which I'm like, why did he say that?
It worked for Nikola Tesla.
I guess so. I don't know. It didn't work for Rocky Balboa, but Rocky's not real, so I don't know. But but yeah, I mean, I thought that was the stupidest thing he said in that book. But everything else seems pretty good because that that band in itself has kind of had to reinvent themselves over and over for different generations. And he talks a lot about that. He talks about the different things that they did to kind of market themselves as a band. And, I spent a lot of time doing flyers and websites for bands when I lived in Fresno, California. And that exposed me to a whole other view of people that were really doing this for themselves. A band is a lot like a startup. You'd be very surprised at how similar they are. And so, yeah, that's one book. The other one is called 11/22/63, and it talks about. It's actually I'm going to sound real dumb saying this, but I actually was never a fan of Stephen King. Never. I mean, you couldn't get me to read Stephen King whatsoever. These are audiobooks, by the way. I don't read any of these thick business books anymore because I don't have time to do that. I'd rather listen to them.
Right.
That's just. Call me lazy, but I love to read as well. So don't call me illiterate either, because I've read more books than anyone in their lifetime. So anyway, this other book is called 11/22/63, and it is basically like almost a science fiction version of the Kennedy assassination. And
okay,
yeah, I was obsessed with JFK for a while. I don't know. I have a weird thing with him. So I've always been kind of fascinated with. I've always been fascinated with the conspiracy around his assassination. I'll say that. And and so this book kind of led me to this book because it talks about that, but it's really a story about a guy who tries to go back in time to prevent it from happening. But that's not even the most important thing, actually. It's this guy's journey. And how he goes back in time is kind of goofy, of course, and I'm assuming Stephen King is like this, but it's the people that read these books are geniuses, right? There's a guy who reads this book. He just does a woman's voice, a man's voice, and everybody in this book's voice extremely well. And I recommend this book very, very much. So that's one book. The Paul Stanley Face the Music is read by Paul Stanley, which I like. I like when books are read by the author.
Right.
And then also Trust Me, I'm Lying. That's another good book that I read 2 years ago, but I always recommend it. So those are books that are gonna, I think they're good for the entrepreneurial mind.
Interesting. I'll definitely have to put those in the show notes so people can check those out. So what?
Trust Me, I'm Lying is written by Jack something. I forget, some guy. I forgot what his name is. But it's all these media hacks that have happened over these years. I mean, it's crazy. Sorry, what was your question?
No, I was going to ask what was that? You said Face the Music, Trust Me, I'm Lying, and 11/22/63.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Cool. So, how can people get in contact with you? How can they follow you if they're interested in doing so?
My social network of choice right now is Instagram. From Instagram, everything else happens. So, Facebook, I'm pretty active on Facebook too. Twitter, I've kind of like, I don't really pay attention to it so much because it's hard to get past the noise, and so I just kind of have one to have one. Although I like it for quick, short things, but that's about all it's really useful for. I don't go on there for news or anything. My two social networks, I would say, are Instagram first, right, and then Facebook as a very close second.
Okay.
And if I see you often, then we don't need to connect. That's pretty much my thing. But if I don't see you and I don't know you, you can connect with me. I'll check you out, you check me out, and then we'll check each other out.
Well, hopefully,
Instagram is CURTISSPOPE. My Facebook is facebook.com/cpope. Yeah.
Okay.
I can't believe I got that. Cpope, CPOPE.
Excellent. Well, hopefully, like I was telling you earlier, there is a conference going on in mid-February called Elasticon. For people who are listening, we're working with them in order to help provide tickets to that conference, and hopefully I'll be able to attend. So if these arrangements all go through and everything like that, I'll be back out there in February. So maybe we can hook up for I don't know, lunch or something.
You should do a live show. You ever done a live show?
No, this is live.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I'm like, oh yeah, huh?
But not an in-person show. I haven't.
Yeah, I
but
guess so.
That would be
cool.
cool.
So. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Because then it's a real big event, right? I mean, because I know the last time that I saw you, I think it was a big to-do. How did you get all those people together? I'm just like, man, does he know everybody that's black in technology in the Bay Area, man? This guy is well connected.
I try to. Yeah, sort of. You know what? It's funny because when I put that meetup together, there were a lot of people saying like, this is like one of the first meetups we've had like with black engineers, and I was just like, you're in the Bay Area. How does this not happen like every day?
No, it doesn't happen. It just
how do you allow
for some reason
from Cincinnati to come and do this? And I don't know. But yeah, it was cool. It was cool knowing that I was responsible for bringing people together, man. I love doing that. So maybe that'll happen. Maybe that'll happen again in February. Maybe I'll put together another meetup and try to do something bigger if I come out that way. So fingers crossed. Hopefully that. Okay, I definitely will. I definitely want to thank you, Curtis, for taking some time out of your evening to join us on the podcast once again. Let's keep in touch. And I know you mentioned possibly co-hosting one of these with me, so let's talk about that offline.
Yeah.
Excellent.
All right. Sounds good, man.
All right. Well, take care, Curtis. Thanks again.
All right, take it easy. Bye.
Bye. That's it for this episode of the Blacks in Technology Big Tech Talk podcast. I want to send a shout out and thanks to our guest, Curtis Pope. If you like what you heard tonight and want to let us know, or if you have any suggestions or comments, email them to us at contactus@blacksintechnology.net. Join us in 2 weeks for episode 87, Changing Lives Through Careers in Tech. I know we did one of these a few weeks ago, but we're doing one with Crystal Banks, and she has a very interesting story. She comes out of the Perscola's program, and Perscola's program is a program where they teach you, they train you on basic IT, or entry, I shouldn't say basic, I should say, because IT isn't basic, entry-level IT skills. So they help you to get your A+, your Network Plus certifications. And she's turned that into a very promising career in technology. So Crystal Banks is going to be our guest in 2 weeks. And I hope you enjoyed what you heard tonight. And remember, tech yourself before you wreck yourself. Take care.
Blacks in Technology.
Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology.